The Alberta government recently announced partnerships with two post-secondary institutions, Lethbridge College and the University of Lethbridge. To talk more about it is the Alberta Agriculture Minister, Devin Dreeshen. Thanks for joining us in studio today, Devin.
Well, great to be here. Thank you very much, Hal, for having me on your show.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about this big investment, $2 million for the college, $1.8 million for the U of L. Tell me more about these initiatives.
Well, it was a great partnership between the Alberta government and the college and the university here in Lethbridge, something that both colleges have an amazing research program already, and we have within the Department of Agriculture and Forestry provincially had researchers that essentially were duplicating work. And when we thought and came to them directly and said, if we could have our researchers go into your program at the college and the university, could you see a benefit? And it's something that, whether it's from irrigation to cattle to bee pollinators, it's something that they thought that there could be an opportunity to have more programming at their post-secondary institutions, having opportunities for researchers to be taught by new researchers being taught by our researchers, and really just whether it's programming opportunities for the college and university, as well as just more research capacity being leveraged from those two institutions. So it was really a win-win for agriculture.
And there's some jobs being created as a result too.
Yeah, we have 3 researchers directly that are being transferred over to the university. We're still working out the details on the college, but it's great to see that this research that ultimately is being led by producers, by farmers here in Alberta, they're actually setting the tone of what type of research they want to see done in the province. And it's great to see that this research continues and again has that leveraging aspect being done at the college and the university here in Lethbridge.
Now, Devin, the province also recently announced a historic $815 million investment into 8 different irrigation districts to modernize irrigation infrastructure and to increase water storage capacity throughout southern Alberta. Which districts are they, and why do you think this was so important for our region?
So yeah, last week it was historic. We had 8 out of the 13 irrigation districts in the province that actually created a consortium amongst themselves, and they signed a deal with the provincial government as well as the Canada Infrastructure Bank for $815 million. Half of that came from the Canada Infrastructure Bank. That's a loan that the districts will have to pay back, but also 20% funding from the districts, 30% grant from the provincial government to make up that $815 million. And it's tremendous irrigation in the province of Alberta. We have about 1.7 million acres currently. With this expansion, it'll be another 200,000 irrigated acres. And just the economic impact is huge. It's about $436 million annually added to Alberta's economy and GDP just with this significant investment into irrigation. And then there's the spin-off jobs, the car dealerships being able to have more economic activity. You're going to see food processors wanting to set up shop here in southern Alberta because of that reliable irrigated acres that they rely on for specialty crops, whether it's sugar beets or potatoes. So it's an overall good news story for the southern Alberta economy and the Alberta economy in general.
Many people would argue that the energy sector is the economic engine that really drives our province, and many would say our country. But the energy sector, as you know, has been struggling for quite some time, the oil and gas sector. Do you think maybe the UCP government is putting more of its focus into agriculture right now?
Well, even with this $850 million investment, there's about 8,000 jobs that will be created. So about 1,300 just on the construction side, and then almost 7,000 from indirect and direct jobs that actually result from the expansion. So that's from the farming to the food processing, everything that goes along with it. So Alberta has seen its tough times when it comes to the energy sector, but we had negative oil prices combined with COVID-19, and to see agriculture kind of ride out through all of that, with the province is expecting a bumper crop this year and strong cattle prices. It is something that it is a bright spot within the Alberta economy.
Moving forward, Devin, what kind of support do you potentially see down the road, for the grain sector and as well for our beef and hog producers?
Well, it's something that we've early on in 2019, last year, we made an initiative, a $1.4 billion private investment target. So we've been very focused at agriculture and forestry to try to do the right things to attract, whether it's foreign investment, Canadian investment, provincial investment to the province, to actually have more value-added products developed here in Alberta. So that helps out farmers because they have another buyer of their produce, as well as a job creation because you're actually going to have people in the food processing sector making more products, and rather than shipping it out on a train to go on a boat, you're actually doing that value added here in the province. So that's something that we're well on the way to hit that target of $1.4 billion in private investment. We saw it here in Lethbridge last year of a $300 million expansion of Cavendish. We've been talking to them for the potato processors to be able to try to do more, to double that footprint. So we are working with food processors to attract investment here in the province and let them do what they do best, which is create high quality food.
China still will not accept Canadian canola from our farmers here. A lot of it's tied in, many people would argue, with Canada detaining Huawei executive Meng Wanzhou. Ever since then, it's like, no, we're not going to accept the Canadian canola. How much has that been a problem? How much has that hurt our canola producers?
Well, it's a billions of dollars of market access loss due to what China did, but it is something that really gave, I think, a shock to the industry to realize that it's good for them to be able to shop around, to make sure that they have other trading partners around the world, and the industry essentially did it for the last couple of years. So that is nice to see that they are directing sales to other areas. It obviously has a depressing price if there's a large market that is you're not going to be able to sell to, but overall it's something that it did hurt Canadian farmers, but at the end of the day, it's something that we had to live with. And again, we're seeing grain companies in Canada find, international trade is like water. It finds a way. And it's great to see that at least canola prices now are relatively stable in Canada.
So let's talk about some of those other markets, Devin, instead of putting all of our eggs, pardon the pun, into two baskets, China and the United States. Where else is Canada looking to? Which other countries?
Well, it's actually, again, part of our economic relaunch and our Alberta's recovery strategy, especially focusing on agriculture, is we're doubling our international trade offices. So we obviously are focusing on the U.S. because they're our one and only neighbor. They're a huge consumer of what we have here in the province and what we produce, but also looking at Mexico, also Singapore as a major hub in the Southeast Asia market, because it's a growing area. They always want a high demand for their growing middle class of higher quality food, of higher protein. And so that is something that we produce, high quality food with clean air, clean land, and clean water. And that's something that sells internationally extremely well. And so we want to make sure that we can go out and promote our agriculture products around the world to every country, but to the leading major ones right now. And that's why we doubled our international footprint with our agriculture trade officers.
How much do you think COVID-19 has really impacted our farmers and ranchers?
Well, it was something early on. We asked the federal government to deem agriculture as an essential service. We did it, I think we were the first province to actually do it when COVID hit, because of the fact that everybody needs to eat. And it's something that we want to make sure that the supply chain of whether it's grain on trains getting to market, or even inputs coming into the province, whether it be fertilizer or medication for livestock, we want to make sure that those supply chains were not disrupted. And so it is something that the federal government did finally deem it an essential service so that there wouldn't be any disruption in international flow. But it's something that I had a lot of farmers, especially in seeding, that would call and say, well, self-isolating is pretty easy because I'm in a tractor cab miles away from anybody else. So overall, I think when you look at agriculture compared to other industries, it fared relatively well due to COVID-19 this year.
I've been talking to some farmers as well here in southwestern Alberta. They're still irate about the carbon tax. They're saying, you know what, I have to dry my grains and this is really killing my business right now. What are you hearing from farmers? And especially now that Trudeau Liberals are talking about another carbon tax on top of the current one. Yeah,
the carbon tax obviously had a terrible impact to farmers because they are a large user of energy, whether it's from heating barns or drying grain or operating equipment. But yes, as you point out, the clean fuel standards, it could be even worse than the carbon tax. So we are fighting the carbon tax at the Supreme Court. We wanted the Alberta Court of Appeals to 4-1 decision that the federal carbon tax was unconstitutional. So the musing of this clean fuel standards has the possibility of being even worse. So we are looking at it as a provincial standpoint of let's truly understand what the actual cost would be, push and nudge the federal government as much as we can to say that this is something that doesn't make sense, especially in our agriculture sector. It's so heavily trade dependent. We do compete internationally, and to have trade exposed industries like agriculture have to pay another huge carbon tax, it really just hurts our competitiveness and the bottom line of our industry. So the clean fuel standard has so much negative consequences if it were to be implemented, and it's something that I'm pretty sure as the province of Alberta we'd be fighting against.
What kind of support is Ottawa really giving the Alberta agriculture sector here? And, recently, Seamus O'Regan, Minister, mentioned the $60 million to fight pine beetles here in Alberta. So that really helps. So is there a stronger connection as opposed to Ottawa and the energy sector?
Well, giving credit where credit's due, Minister O'Regan, I met with him when Premier Kenney led a delegation down to Ottawa, and that was the very first thing I brought up was the mountain pine beetle. The federal government gave, I think it was $75 million over 3 years to the maritime provinces to fight to their equivalent of the mountain pine beetle in those provinces that was going around provincial borders. I made the case that the mountain pine beetle originated in British Columbia, wasn't managed properly, spread over into Alberta. We actually have the Saskatchewan government giving us $1 million a year to fight the mountain pine beetle in Alberta so it doesn't spread into Saskatchewan along the boreal forest. So my argument to Minister O'Regan was this is a national issue and there should be federal funds coming. And a year plus later, he did deliver. So $60 million over 3 years is coming from the federal government, and that'll be on top of what the province spends every year to fight the mountain pine beetle. And since 2004-06, I believe, we've spent over $500 million combating this disease or this pest that ultimately threatens about $11 billion worth of pine trees in the province of Alberta. So
it's quite a bit, yeah.
It's something that we have to do everything we can to try to mitigate it. And again, I did publicly thank Minister O'Regan for helping Alberta in this national fight.
Now, you're a farmer yourself. You farm out in central Alberta outside of Innisfail. And did you have a bit of a bumper crop this year?
Yeah, the barley was fantastic. Wheat was kind of normal. Canola wasn't as good as we were hoping for. But again, it's interesting to look at the crop reports from across the province. And in the southern parts, I think every crop was near a bumper if you could dodge the hail. Central Alberta was kind of a mixed reading. But there was a band north of Edmonton that really just had excess moisture the entire year, a lot of unseeded acres. And the Agriculture Financial Services Corporation, AFSC, their latest report is about 9-10% higher than the 10-year average. So an amazing overall crop coming out of Alberta, something that the CP and CN, our rail lines and the grain companies are trying to wrestle with. How can we actually make sure we can get this crop out to market?
If not, we need bigger silos, right, to store all of these
Well,
crops.
and on-farm storage is obviously an issue. And it's something that but it's not a good news story overall throughout the province. There are some areas, again, that band north of Edmonton, that they've had about 4 or 5 really bad years of just excess moisture. So although overall it could be a record crop this year, which is fantastic for the province, there are still pockets where it wasn't a good year. And that's something that the latest estimate that I saw was almost $500 million going out in crop insurance payments to those very wet areas of the province. So overall, a great ag news story, but there are some problem areas. But again, that's why we have crop insurance here in the province.
What are some of the issues moving forward that a lot of our farmers and ranchers will face outside of COVID-19, the pandemic, outside of the carbon tax, and lack of moisture or too much moisture?
Mm-hmm. Well, weather is always going to be a difficult issue, but I think so many farmers, they view red tape and just too much government interference as something that really holds them back. So whether it is a clean fuel standards or new regulations coming down on them, they're always fighting on the margins. And when they always get added government, so many farmers just say, just do no harm, just leave us alone as a government. So that's something that we, from a provincial standpoint, do everything we can to just set the playing field for our farmers and ranchers and let them compete on a global scale, because they have the knowledge, they have the know-how, and they can compete and do a fantastic job. Alberta beef is world-renowned. Our high-quality grains that we produce here and ship around the world, usually we import it back when it's been processed in other areas. But overall, agriculture is so resilient and strong. It's always been woven into the fabric of Alberta. And it's something that I think modern agriculture, especially with the research announcements that we made today, it's something that it always has to be cutting edge and leading the pack, because if you don't, you end up getting swamped. So agriculture is a real good bright spot for the province.
Alberta Agriculture Minister Devin Dreeshen, congrats on the bumper crop, and thanks for joining me in studio today.
Well, thank you so much, Hal. I really appreciate it.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.